It's October 25th, 2022. This is Seattle, Washington. I'm Judith Y. And I'm the District 40 Archives Chair. I'm here today with Phil S. So Phil, how about introducing yourself?
Thank you, Judith. I have a sobriety date of March 18th, 1994. I was 45 years old when I got started. And 1994 is kind of interesting to me because I was actually born in 1949. So the numbers switched around. And I was raised in Vermont. And I smile because Bill Wilson was raised in Western Vermont, near where my mother was born. And Bob was from Eastern Vermont, up the river from where I was raised. And he went to Dartmouth College, and I also went to Dartmouth College. So my first experience with alcohol, I probably first swallowed it as a grade schooler. There was some big fuss at the dinner table about how children in France drank wine with their meals. And so when I've done my step work, I've kind of decided that rosé was the first thing that I ever consumed. But I knew I hit bottom in the winter of 1994. I actually was literally at a jumping off point. I was on a ski lift here in the Cascades, and a voice said, "Why don't you just jump off? It'll take care of everything." Well, I didn't know, first of all, that everything needed being taken care of. I was beside myself, rigid with fear. I finally got off the mountain as one's intended to, by getting off the lift appropriately, and I skied down the hill. But in the parking lot, I picked up a rock from it was not paved, it was a gravel lot. And I picked up a small rock. There was water that had been running across it from melting ice, and I brought it home, and I have it to this day. It sits in a little juice glass. It's on the counter there, but it sits in a little juice glass, and it's submerged with water. And it's a sculpture that I assembled, and I basically have to keep the water, because the water evaporates. I have to keep the water in the jar, in the glass. I have to keep the rock submerged. Why? Well, there's a message that was given many years ago by someone dear to me, by his father actually. Said, "You can be in the flow of life just like a rock in a river, but you take that rock out of the river, put it on the shore, and in pretty short time, the sunshine will have dried it off, and there'll be no evidence that it was ever in the river." And I just want to be in that flow of life. I want to experience step 11 and be in conscious contact. And so I keep that little rock, and it's a little reminder for me to stay submerged, to stay present and have that connection with my higher power. And so for me, addiction is a self-destructive business. And I'm just glad to be, I don't want to minimize it. I'm very glad to be alive. It's so wonderful to be alive. I attended my first AA meeting on April 1st of 1994. And my last drink, I told you, was in mid-March. I had one beer with my nephew, who was here in town for some studies. Yeah, it was at a Mexican restaurant. And I digress. Let me just say that that first meeting was at the big hall on Boylston Avenue on Capitol Hill here in Seattle. And it was a smoking meeting. And the experience I had from the readings, from the participation, I remember volunteering to read the traditions. I made a big hit because I could pronounce anonymity properly. And this fellow said, "Hey, Phil, you're a good reader." So I just, I knew I was home, but I knew I needed to find another location, and I was aware that there were different meetings. You could find a meeting much like you could find a branch bank or something. So I knew that I needed to be finding a place that wasn't a smoking meeting, because I found it impossible. That some people wonder, where do you first hear about AA? Well, in doing my step work, I decided that I first heard about it probably from reading Mad Magazine. In the 1950s, I would say that cartoonists probably found AA to be an easy target, something that was curious, maybe a threat to them and their pastimes. At any rate, I can say that I saw posters up for different meetings on, I believe, on light poles on Olive Way. And I think that's where I first saw a poster announcing Practice These Principles at the Red Robin meeting at 7 a.m. at Olive and Summit. So yeah, I started attending there because it was an easy roll out of bed and jump in my little pickup and drive down Boylston Street. And before you knew it, I was there, at the meeting. So that was very convenient. And I had a sponsor who was an RN who I met through another group called Living in Process, where it was about honoring one's feelings. And I knew that I was addicted to coffee, and that blocked my feelings. And I could tell that I was escaping life to dangerous degrees if this voice was telling me to take care of everything, for goodness sake. So I knew that alcohol was blocking my feelings. I knew I wasn't experiencing myself. And so it was at this facility of honoring one's feelings that I heard about. Yeah, I heard about addiction, and I heard about 12-step meetings and the availability of them. And I was asked by the facilitator at this group to talk about beverages that I had mentioned, and I said I wouldn't. I was invited to talk about them, and I said I wouldn't. No sooner had I said I wouldn't, then I just proceeded to talk about what amounts of beer I had, drinking I would do in the dark before I left to go dancing. I thought about that this afternoon. Who was I kidding? I mean, did I think that my conscience couldn't see me standing there in the kitchen taking little shots of Cointreau or whatever that I'd been given as some bizarre gift, yeah, I was definitely drinking for the feeling that it brought me. I was drinking to get drunk, and I was drinking for the change it would bring in me. I got that sponsor from there. She had training in alcoholism and dependency programs as well, and she suggested a 90 and 90. So I started going to PTP on a daily basis, and I would attend on weekends. I might go to 2 more meetings in that day. So I hit 3 meetings, morning, noon, and night, just because I might be on business out of town for a few days, and I wouldn't necessarily have my bearings to get to a meeting out of town. So I wanted to make sure that I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. I was really into that. And I've shared at the meeting before that when the 90th day came, I was really self-deprecating about this, because I felt that it was pretty clear the people that I was listening to were around for years and, in fact, decades. And it seemed like there was no reason that I wouldn't follow suit. And so I made these snide remarks about 90 days. And I remember this gentleman saying to me, no, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that response that came, that encouragement that came to pause and have some respect for myself and respect for the experience of the commitment. I didn't sponsor too many people starting out. One of my first ones just wanted to apparently gaze into my eyes at the coffee shop or whatever. He didn't do any work or any assignments. I'm so grateful to one of the elders that was coming to PTP saying, we're not teaching school. And it was confronting to me, but I suddenly realized, and as I'm speaking right now, I remember when we got a blackboard at my home and my older sister two of us loved playing school. My father was a professor and he found out that she was teaching me subtraction before it was being offered in my class. And that was a no-no, and we had to stop playing school. But I think we both liked school. We did school well. And it was quite a revelation to hear from this gentleman that I needed to be a listener, I needed to be available, and these people were going to be working the steps with me, but I wasn't giving out grades, for example. Another early sponsee shared with me during a fifth step about criminal behavior, extensive, which made me quite uncomfortable. And I got back in touch with my sponsor about it. It was so sweet to hear from her something along the lines of, there were comforting words, something like, HP is really giving you a doozy. And we both kind of chuckled about it. And I felt like I could relax, though I felt way over my head, I could just relax. And as it turned out, he and I did not keep in touch. And it became, just part of an experience for me that protected me. I pray that he is safe and healthy. I don't know, I haven't seen him in decades. But I can say that I got started in another program. I was going after what was killing me fastest. And I got started in another program in 1994, about 6 months after AA, dealing with compulsivity, with time and money. In 1996, I got started with one dealing with compulsivity around sexual activity. And 2000, I started attending meetings regularly in Al-Anon. I generally don't talk about these other programs, but it's where my activities have gone to sponsor, to be of service in a larger community, whether it be at a state level or larger, at an international convention, whatever. The convention for AA in Seattle was in 1993, I believe. Anyhow, it happened when I was still out there. I remember walking by and hearing about it or reading about it in the paper, but I missed the whole thing. It was just, it was before my time. But I've gotten a lot out of sponsoring. I was adding up, the numbers of folks, and I can only remember a couple in AA. And so that's only about a tenth of the number of people that I can recall that I've sponsored. And I often say to them, I don't keep a dossier. And man alive, let alone not keeping a dossier, at my senior condition, I'm lucky what I can remember at all. So I will say that.
I'm interested in hearing how you work the steps.
Yeah, I'll just say I worked them with the first sponsor almost Dr. Bob style, where, She had heard about my powerlessness, didn't have any question about it, asked me if I had any question about it. No. Looked over at me, do you believe in God? And I said, yeah. Said, okay, you've done your second step. So it certainly wasn't like school with that first sponsor. It was not like school. It was more about, let's get you locked in here, you know. So later, after that person relocated, I took another sponsor who was from PTP, and we did a lot of writing. And I was quite an ambitious writer. And then I remember that it came to a point where that sponsor said, no more writing. I would read all this stuff that I had read. And it just got to be voluminous and not manageable. You know, it's showing my compulsivity and unmanageability, actually. So I will say that in some notes I jotted down around my recovery, it's been really important for me to acknowledge that at 10 years in, I had done the steps a number of different times and in various programs. But I was suddenly invited around 2004 to use a format that clicked for me. It was a way of using a notebook and putting each resentment per page. It was just a style. And being an artist and being connected to things visually, it was something that changed me. It changed my understanding, and it was a gift. It was such a gift.
Rather than writing, or?
No, it was writing. It was all writing. It was all writing. In fact, as far as the visual stuff, the one who asked me to do my powerlessness and unmanageability, she wanted a timeline, and I said, could I make a painting? And she said, sure. So one day at PTP on Zoom, I had this big, long, narrow painting back behind on this furniture, but I declined to have props today. Anyhow, I do have something that seems close to a prop later, but I will tell you that the format, the way the format was done, the way the writing was specified, asked, put the name of the person at the top, name 3 things that three resentments that you have, keep them to one line. All of these kind of guidance was just awesome. And that's the way I have proceeded with sponsees since then. It doesn't matter the program. That's the way I've proceeded. And it's been just very, very powerful. And I spoke to that sponsor today on the phone and acknowledged that I'm still using it and expressed my gratitude. So I would say that's the way I do the steps. In terms of step 11, I never really wanted to talk about it very much because it's been 50 years over since I've begun to focus my attention within. So one would say, well, this is not a very good testament if you've got to go to AA. Finally, I was able to separate. One is only a path to focus within. The other is healing from a condition of mind and body that 12-step model works to do that healing. You don't need to make comparisons or have expectations that the particular practice or guidance that I've thrived on for decades is any less than, or there's something about it that doesn't work. I just found out that I can't have expectations on it to take care of what AA takes care of so well. So I have had a lot of experience of sitting quietly, reflecting, but it's been a joy to feel some freedom in the last 8 years or so to speak up about step 11, which I never wanted to in the past. It was so private. It was so private. I can say that at PTP, at the first location, I was invited to be a coffee maker. And I had to stand up for myself and say, coffee blocks my feelings. I don't drink coffee. I abstained from coffee at the same time I stopped drinking alcohol. Maybe there's a coffee drinker or somebody else that can help with that. I was willing to move on up to Capons. That was the second location, which is on 15th and Mercer. So it was a chicken place, and they didn't really like us. The people in the kitchen were very noisy, and they didn't respect our requests that we're trying to have a meeting and talk to each other. And they were small. We were lucky if 6 people would come. I can remember inviting a woman to come and lead the meeting, and she did. And I called her maybe a month later and said, would you come and lead the meeting? She said, I already did it. And I didn't talk back to her, but in my own mind, and probably with somebody from the meeting, I said, so do it again. You know, I mean, there was something about the beauty of the experience and being in the moment that if you made it to the meeting, then you had what the meeting had to offer. If you weren't there, you didn't have it, and you couldn't find out about it. It wasn't like missing the postage stamp collectors club or something where you get to ask what happened while I was gone. You know, in this case, it's like what you hear here stays here. So either go and experience it or you don't. And I got so much out of it. But eventually we moved down the street to Jack's. And I remember the first guy, one of the very first days of Jack's, the guy that had helped organize it, he had been talking to them and suggesting that the kitchen could bring us breakfast to the table if we wanted. So I remember him ordering these eggs over easy, and I watched these runny yolks going all over. I was so distracted, and I thought to myself, I really hope that they stop serving food at the meeting, because I'm not going to listen at all. I have such a short attention span, and I'm going to really be distracted about what's on everybody's plate. And they did stop the food stuff, but they didn't stop serving coffee. You know, that was, I mean, PTP had their own servers, but yeah, it still kept serving coffee. You know, I can't remember the circumstances around why we needed to leave, but we did. It wasn't anything untoward, like somebody had helped themselves to the liquor cabinet or anything like that. Not that I'm aware of. It was something to do with management or finances or something, but we were good tenants. We were good tenants. We ended up moving to a place on 13th, south of John and north of Madison. It was Advent Christian. All I remember is they had cold Samsonite metal chairs. It was really depressing. It was the basement of this church. And we'd been all this classy restaurant stuff, you know, with big plate glass windows and right there on the street level. And it's all kind of grown up and civilized or something. The church was really depressing. And I'm so glad that didn't last for very long. I think now it's an Ethiopian church. Yeah, I was able to find out today that it was called Advent Christian. And after that, it came back up to 15th, and Capons had gone out of business or moved or whatever, the franchise had closed. I think there was still one in Wallingford, but anyhow, we had a Chutney's. And you remember Chutney's. And then from Chutney's, we went to Harvard, Howell and Harvard Presbyterian Church. And from there to Good Shepherd, and then to Zoom. And now Zoom and Good Shepherd. I have a third edition that's got on the inside cover May 1st, 1994. And there's a group of names. People have signed their sobriety dates. And the person who instigated the whole thing to start at Red Robin, his signature is in there and his dates. George Evans. George has passed, but yeah, there's a legacy, you know, there's just a strong legacy because the meeting has continued to be literature-based, which was always kind of its hallmark. So yeah, wonderful. A few years back, someone else named Phil started coming. So I try to use my initial.
So Phil, my impression was that you were gay, is that correct?
Yeah, as far as gay AA goes,
Yeah. If you want to say anything about that, that's great. But if you know.
Yeah, I do. I wrote some, I jotted down some little notes around the fact that in that period between April 1st, 94 and June, when I started going to PTP, I don't remember the first day I went to PTP, but I was going to Queen Anne Gay Group, which would meet once a week. And then when I was at PTP, they would pass around a clipboard that would serve as a phone list, and people, but it was a little bit strange, especially from long-timers from New York. They were going, why are we registering when we come to this meeting? And I was like, just come. But for the longest time, there would be a clipboard, and maybe when you were at Chutney's, it was still going around where there'd be a clipboard and you put their name and their home group and their sponsor's name and their phone number. Well, I was putting QAGG, and there was one fellow there that had come back into the program, and he made a disparaging remark one day about gay AA or something. Seemed a little dated, but you know, he just made this disparaging remark. It almost seemed like he was playing a tape from 10 years before or something when it was more controversial. At any rate, it didn't faze me that much, but this one disparaging remark I remember. And then later, the person who is attributed as being the person to say PTP was her home group, the first person to say that PTP was her home group, is still cooking in AA. And I see on social media, they're still alive and well. That person asked me, is this your home group? You come here every day. And I say, well, I like to put QAGG because I like people to know that I'm gay. And she said, really kindly, she said, you might want to look at that. And I was really touched, and I've never forgotten it. And I may be looking back with rose-colored glasses. I may have been a little bit miffed, actually, for this person. I could have taken it as a challenge. But the fact is, today I felt so, as I reflected on it, I felt so relaxed and grateful for that person to use that expression. You might want to take a look at that. It's like, it has such a universal capacity. It's like, anytime a person's personality comes barging forward, you can just kindly say, you might want to take a look at that. Or that other favorite is, how's it working for you? You know? So I don't have much connection with gay AA, and I've never experienced, no, that's not true. I went to one retreat. Here where we went out near Mount Si. that was AA sponsored. But most of my activities, convention-wise or retreat-wise, have been with other programs. I've not been interested in roundups, which are an institution in and of themselves, and I haven't participated in gay roundups. I don't expect I will. Yeah, I just don't really have a lot of experience with things that I hear about, such as assembly or district. The other groups are not as populated, and they don't have that same type of, they don't mimic that structure exactly. So, I help out. I definitely am involved in service, a lot of it. But it just has different time and space, different style to the requirement of it.
Well, since you said the word service, could you talk some more about service and what it means to your recovery?
Lots of times I like to use synonyms such as participation or helping out, because I feel that sometimes that word service can remind me of a memorial service or a church service or something that's got a formality about it and a religiosity that I just feel I'm free from when I'm involved with 12-step. I have not bought into remarks that, oh, AA is just another religion. I don't really feel like, in my experience, when I became a member of a church as a teenager, it had a certain feeling to it. And the feeling that I liked best, the part that I liked best, was that everybody was equal, that we didn't have attitudes about who was on the in crowd or not. We just went. Otherwise, there was that other behavior going on about if you lived on a farm or not, if you came to school on a bus or not, if you were a bus kid or not. So with me, with service, I just feel like it's about helping out. And I helped out with PTP for 4 years. It was exhausting. I didn't really understand the toll it was taking on me, but every 4th week, I would have the key and I would open up the building. I would go to Jack's. Fortunately, I didn't live that many blocks away. I'm sure that I'm the only person that's ever been chased by a police car on the way to the meeting and told to get out of the car by an officer. I had been racing. I had overslept, and I was racing to get the key in the door and let everybody in. They were all standing huddled around outside. The place is called Vacilando now. So yeah, I was trying to get back in this swim, and I was driving very fast up the hill from Broadway up Harrison. It was crazy. And I got chased by a cop, and he stopped me. I pulled over what used to be that fire station. It wasn't all blocked off. And I pulled right in there, and he jumped out, get out of the car. So I explained, I had a key. It was embarrassing, but I didn't get a ticket. Anyhow, I did that so much. And then I took a break. I realized I started counting the years, and it's embarrassing. I mean, it's been over 20 years I've taken a break from doing the key. But I did, when I started collecting a pension, I was no longer going into a 9-to-5 job. I'm self-employed as an artist now. But when I started taking a pension, I had some time that I really wanted to give back. And I remember being of service as a secretary, and I really enjoyed trying to be inclusive and bring a variety of people to lead the meeting, to be this be the speaker, bring the topic. And that was very rewarding. I did it a couple of times, I think, not a lot. I did it a few times. And it's a wonderful service. It's wonderful. And it requires focus. And I think to help out and be effective, it's just to our advantage to accept some responsibility, to have some focus. I know for me, a lot of my escaping and my blocking my feelings allowed me to deny accepting any responsibility. I was just devil may care. Whatever was going to happen, that'll be fine. It's selfish in many respects, in that it's not really being part of a team. It's very isolated, in fact, being just drifting. It's a little bit more like being in a pinball machine where I'm just kind of bouncing around. And gravity is playing a big part, as I bounced on. So I like different, I'm happy to help out with greeting people. There's been so many different things I've done over the years, helping with the literature, packing things up. I've often helped, pack up the meeting afterwards or something like that. Giving rides to people, all kinds of things I felt have been service. And it's been impossible. I couldn't be here today if I hadn't availed myself of that aspect of accepting responsibility. Yeah, that's the way I see it. Being willing to accept responsibility. My vision is to know myself, live consciously with a heart filled with gratitude. I believe that the steps have helped me with that. Meetings have helped me with that. And being of service. Sponsorship is a really powerful service in terms of being available to others, take calls. I took one this afternoon when I wanted to just be, reviewing and writing, but the call wasn't that terribly long, and I was able to still do lots of reviewing and writing, and even a little resting. So I'm glad I got to tell you about the book that lists the first date, that our anniversary date for the meeting is May 1st of 1994.
That's a treasure to have.
Yeah, it's nice. So I consider myself the in-house archivist, but if it needs to be somewhere else. I'm signing a last will and testament at the end of this week, and I'm aware of this has a historic value, and I can certainly put it on the gift list that it gets into, the hands of someone younger than me.
So when I started being the archivist, they had this box of files from the Capitol Hill Alana Club. And so they were happy to give it back to me. And so no one would know in my family what this box is. So I made a label that said, if found, deliver this box to the Seattle intergroup with the address and the phone number and all. Because, it's a sticky in your book might also be a good thing.
I can say that I went to the Alana Club for many, many meetings in other programs. They provided a great service to recovery. Yeah, I went to many meetings at the club there, but I don't think many in AA.
Could you talk a little bit about cross meetings, going to meetings? I know some people really recommend doing Al-Anon as well as AA, but and other people go to OA and some other places too.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't talk about it that much. I think it might be because it falls into that arena of it's for the people who want it. And so I've always been intrigued when someone will begin their share and they'll talk about, or in their story, and they'll talk about, yeah, I did an online search and there are 79 different 12-step groups or whatever. They're just, there are a lot. I can only think of a few that I've never attended, Emotions Anonymous. But I've, when I worked in a profession that would sometimes, not somehow, send me to out of state or overseas, and I would go to meetings in different languages, not necessarily able to translate, though I had some rudimentary training. I wouldn't have used that word when I was in high school, but it was rudimentary. Anyhow, I had some exposure to some languages, so I could make out words. But when I went to a meeting in Japan, the only thing I could understand was in the traditions when they said something about special meetings or something like that. They used the English words. I mean, it was for the experience. It was for the experience. I remember going to this meeting in northern Spain where it was so provincial and so, I misunderstood something, or I don't know, I arrived a little bit late. And all these people were seated around this sort of like a refectory table, a great big long table, all wearing dark clothes, just this big group of people. And they just stared at me when I came in. There was no thought of like, do you speak our language, or how are you? Welcome, have a seat. It was just really mysterious. Maybe they thought that I was from the federal government or something, like I was a spy. I don't know. But it was a memorable experience for me. And I stayed sober. I stayed sober. So I first heard about people traveling and going to meetings at the Red Robin PTP. And I thought, wow, that sounds like something I'll never be able to do. But things unfolded, and my passion for recovery took me to meetings. I went to Paris once, and I went to 4 different meetings in 4 days. I was only there about 5 days, I think, or less, for my work. And I also fit in these different meetings and different programs. It was not that difficult to find out, the address and make my way there. Yeah, to me, that had tourism all beat, because I could just be part of the daily life, see what it was like, and be sober. But I think a common thread, I've been very evasive, but I will say a common thread is compulsivity. There's a lack of control. Al-Anon, there can be an obsession with control, managing, but in co-addiction, there's sometimes over-control, an emphasis on trying to make things safe, an emphasis on feeling victimized. And it's hard for people to own up to that lots of times. But I tell you, when I started owning up to it, it just opened up doors. So anyhow, I see that, sex inventory in AA may just work fine for somebody, but somebody else may discover, oh boy, I have a feeling I could just concentrate on the steps on this alone. And that happens to some people. Or with people in denial and making jokes about retail therapy or being a shopaholic, ha, ha, ha. And it's like, really, It's blocking my feelings, and it's creating unmanageability where I can't enjoy life. Compromises my capacity to be sober. And I'm not talking about sober boring. I'm talking about healthy. There are plenty of folks that are deeply indebted to the 12-step model that don't go to AA, but they benefit from it.
Do you have a favorite passage from the readings, from the literature that you think about?
Yes. I didn't expect that question, but I was prepared. I thought of it earlier this afternoon as I was crossing the living room rug. We had to concede to our innermost selves. That expression to me brings chills. It opens up a vista that's on the inside. Living consciously is not just about getting along with the gas station attendant or getting along with my family member on the phone. It's about knowing myself. Those words, innermost self, I love that expression. That I had to concede to my innermost self. I love it. It helps me every day.
Thank you so much.